All right, shalom and welcome back to the channel, you guys. A few days ago, I had somebody reaching out to me and asked me if I've searched out this comet, this interstellar object. And the answer is yes, I have. I've got a couple of codes on it. Matter of fact, it's encoded several times. We're going to look at one access term that I felt led to search, which is interstellar object. But before we look at those codes and a couple to compare, I want to take us to Stefan Burns on YouTube and get a little bit of science before we jump into these codes and try to understand this very unusual object. This is not like a normal comet, you guys, and the experts are not even sure it is a comet. Some are even calling it a spaceship. A lot of bizarre things about this. Let's listen to Stefan and react to what he's going to present here on 3i Atlas. You guys, here we go.
Hey everyone, geophysicist Stefan Burns here. A massive interstellar object is currently hurtling through our solar system at incredible speeds. This is 3i Atlas. It's moving at about 58 kilometers per second at this moment in time. That's already faster than the orbital velocity of Mercury, which is the fastest planet in our solar system, being closest to the sun. And 3i Atlas will speed up to about 68 kilometers per second during its closest approach to the sun, its perihelion, on October 29th of this year, 2025. The other thing about 3i Atlas is that it is absolutely massive. It has a coma surrounding it that right now has been calculated to be about 700,000 kilometers across. That is half the diameter of the sun. Now, the actual nucleus inside it, that is unknown, but there are estimates now that's about 46 to 50 kilometers in diameter. So this is a massive object if we just look at its nucleus size coming in from beyond our solar system. And if we look at its envelope of dusty gas and plasma, it is half the diameter of the sun.
Now, that is large, you guys, half the diameter of the sun. And by the way, that's the sun behind me there. We're seeing some plasma off of it in that picture.
So this is an absolutely massive object. That carbon dioxide coma shows up really well in near infrared measurements. We have that now from Sphere X and also from the James Webb Space Telescope. Its optical coma is smaller at about twice the diameter of the Earth. That's about 25,000 kilometers. But regardless, we have this very energetic object traveling through our solar system, which has this envelope of gas, dust, and plasma, meaning it is very electromagnetically active. And because it is so
Well, that says a lot right there. Electric universe, anyone? Remember talking about this before with Comet Sighting Spring, and when we were observing Sighting Spring, roughly 10, 11 years ago. You guys, if you're with me at that time, you might remember when I was on call with some scientists at Sighting Spring Observatory in Australia at the time, and they were looking to prove they had a theory that there was going to be an electrical discharge between Sighting Spring and Mars. And indeed, there was. And we were right in the middle of that, able to talk to those scientists, show codes. I've got the Sighting Spring code pulled up here. We might look at that in a minute, where the word collides was there. And I got that from the researchers there because they believed there was going to be a collision. Now, if you recall, I personally interpreted the code to mean that it was going to be some sort of deep impact. Of course, that didn't happen, but the code was still correct. There was a collision. Now, will we see that with this one that we're about to see? I'm thinking we might, folks, based on looking at the 3D solar system viewer of like he just showed here just a moment ago. This thing is going to get close to both Mars and Jupiter. And if you recall, Schumacher-Levy 9 back in the 90s that broke apart, they called it a string of pearls, and like 9 objects impacted Jupiter because the gravity pulled it apart. Could we possibly see something like that? Because it is going to fly right by Jupiter. And I'm thinking we're probably going to be able to see it better with Jupiter and not Mars because it's going to be on the backside of the sun at that point. But electric universe, folks, maybe another opportunity to see this.
Large with that carbon
And by the
dioxide,
way,
it's going to
interstellar object, there's only been three. The first one was Oumuamua, which is a Hawaiian word, which means the one that comes first, implying that there were going to be more. And indeed, there have been. One was Mosbo or Bomaz or something like that, a Russian word. And then this one, Atlas, which is coming, which would be the third object. How did they know that there were going to be others? Harbinger, I guarantee you.
to very likely have a lot of unique electromagnetic interactions within our solar system, especially when you consider that it is traveling retrograde 175 degrees inclined to the ecliptic plane, meaning there's only a 5-degree inclination difference between the orbit of 3I Atlas and all the planets in our solar system. So it's interacting with the heliospheric current sheet. It's moving through the solar wind for a long duration of time. And as a result, I think we're going to see some very, very interesting consequences as a result of this third interstellar visitor flyby. Well,
Now, what they've already determined, but with some mathematics and some calculations, because they can see how much carbon is being burned off every second. I think it's like 6 kilos of carbon that is being burned off every second. And they've made some calculations on over time how much has been lost and how large, because this thing was much larger than it is now. It's actually eroded with the solar winds. That fascinates me.
begin with some of our most recent observations on 3I Atlas as provided by the James Webb Space Telescope, one of the most powerful telescopes that we currently have. And it takes measurements in the near infrared spectrum. So this is just below visible light. And that allows us to see things like dust and also carbon dioxide and some of these other gases very well, which normally you wouldn't be able to see with visible light because of scattering. So we have these 4 flux maps here, and they correspond to different micrometer slices of this overall spectrum. And we see the coma size as a result of that for different things. For example, this one right there is for carbon dioxide, where this is a smaller micrometer observation that is more in this dust range. And then we also see here the spectrum for water, specifically water H2O, and then we also see this flux map there for carbon monoxide. So we see that these there's like a shell structure around whatever this central nucleus is, and there is an elemental differentiation that is taking place with this interstellar object. The spectrum really tells quite an interesting story because it has a tremendously high percentage of carbon dioxide, CO2. It's enhanced to a much greater degree than most comets that we've ever observed. There's only been one other comet that had a higher CO2 to water ratio. And I think just in general, with these observations of 3I Atlas and our interpretation of them, we really need to keep in mind that it is of interstellar origin. And so we really probably can't apply too much of what we know now with all the observations that we've made of comets and our standard models of comets, which is based on sublimation, to 3I Atlas, because it was created and evolved in a completely different interstellar environment. From the original nursery, you could call it, that it was created in, to its travel through interstellar space, which has probably been doing for a very, very long time, being blasted by galactic cosmic rays and more. Now it's within our heliosphere. Now it's interacting with the solar wind and the larger electric circuits of the solar system. And as it gets closer and closer to the sun, cutting within the orbit of Mars, the furthest most out inner planet, making it through the asteroid belt, reaching Mars, doing that perihelion, it's probably going to really strongly interact with those near field electric circuits of the sun that all the inner planets interact with. Here we see that spectrum, water, slight bump there. This is all dust. We measure this, the flux there. This is the logarithmic scale. Here we see our wavelength. We see this deficiency there in water ice. And then we see its big spike up to carbon dioxide. And then we also have carbon monoxide there, some other carbon-based compounds. So in general, this is a very carbon-rich object that's sublimating these volatiles out into space, and or there's some level of photoionization that's occurring, or even particle interactions causing temporary ionization. And in general, with 3I Atlas, it is a complex dusty plasma coma that it has. So it's not just dust and ice and gas. There is plasma involved. 99% of the universe is composed of plasma. As it gets,
In other words, it's electrical universe. And this is why I'm thinking it's very possible, and no one is saying it now. What if we see another discharge? Or even, is it possible that it can be pulled into Jupiter with its gravitational pull?
closer and closer to the sun, that ionization of the coma is going to increase, making it more electromagnetically active and also expanding the size of that coma. At some point, we could see this coma, specifically the carbon dioxide coma of 3I Atlas, expand to perhaps even the size of the sun or beyond.
Wow.
Here we have two more observations.
Wow. That's incredible.
Of 3I Atlas, so we can better understand this coma, this complex dusty plasma that's
Will it look like two suns in the sky?
surrounding this object. This first graphic here is provided by the 2-meter twin telescope array. It's a deep G-band optical image, and we see the coma there. They have this size there of about 25,000 kilometers across for this visible light coma. That's twice the diameter of the Earth. So already quite large, just looking at the visible light spectrum. Now, if you look at it in near infrared, this is provided by Sphere X, you see that the size is much larger, 700,000 kilometers across approximately. And again, that
700,000 kilometers, you guys.
Very likely to expand and grow as 3I Atlas gets closer and closer to the sun. So this is primarily CO2 dominant right there. And CO2 has some very interesting properties because we've done a lot of laboratory experiments with plasma using CO2 and a mixture of other gases. And what we find is that they actually create these nanoparticles. By the way, there are a ton of research papers I have linked in the video description if you'd like to read up more on 3I Atlas and some of these complex dusty plasma characteristics. If you wanted to, you could throw them all into Notebook LM and have it generate a podcast for you and just listen to that to get more in-depth information. Here we see a complex dusty plasma in the laboratory. So this is a carbon-rich plasma that was created with a microwave, and we see this very bright region there in the center. That is a dust-free void that is producing a ton of light, and then we get this complex dusty plasma surrounding it. But what we see both in
What does it say right there? Cosmo-rich plasma in laboratory setting creates nanoparticle-sized diamonds and graphite crystals. What?
space and also in laboratory settings is that plasma generates dust. And dust maybe isn't nuanced enough of a term. So what is plasma? Plasma is the fourth state of matter. And when you take a molecule or even an atom and you cause that electron to pop off, you ionize it and you build these two charge carriers, positive and negative. Now they are susceptible to the electromagnetic force much more so than they would have been otherwise. Because when they're neutral, they don't interact with electromagnetic fields all that easily. But the moment they become charged, they are dominantly under that influence. And the electromagnetic force is 10 to the 30 something times more.
So imagine walking across your carpet and, dragging your feet on it and then touching, as you go across your living room, dragging your feet, you're building a charge. Well, this object is doing the same thing as it moves through the solar system, it is building a charge.
Powerful than gravity. So it can extend much, much, much further out. So this coma surrounding 3I Atlas, if it is a complex dusty plasma, and it is a complex dusty plasma, because you're going to have some level of ionization of that gas that's sublimating from the surface of this object, it's going to behave electromagnetically. We see some very interesting things with complex dusty plasmas. In this research paper, they created these complex dusty plasmas, and what the plasma starts to do is it will start to create dust grains. Just inherently, any plasma seems to do this, which is why you can't talk about plasmas without talking about dust. And we call them complex because they form these very unique cellular structures, and they can take on crystalline dynamics. So they can form these crystalline bonds within them, even though they are highly ionized and mobile and they have charge, they also have an inherent ordered structure that they form. And so they found these plasmoids, these little balls of plasma being generated in these laboratory experiments. And within these plasmoids, they found that they were producing these nanoparticle diamonds and also graphite, and that those clusters would grow together into larger nanoparticle grains. So these like nano diamonds were like 2 to 5 nanometers across, but they would create grains and conglomerates like 10, 15, 50 nanometers across. And so what we see is that when you have these sort of gases mixed together and then you ionize them into a plasma, the plasma starts to produce these really fantastic materials. Diamonds, the hardest known substance that we know of, graphite, highly conductive and known for its very unique properties. And so we have 3I Atlas flying through at high speeds through the solar system. As it's getting closer to the sun, it's ionizing more and more, just simply because the sun is emitting a lot of ultraviolet, extreme ultraviolet, X-ray radiation. This is all happening during solar maximum, which increases that photoionization effect. And then you are going to get some ionization from the solar wind particles. That is all plasma. And also any large explosion on the sun that generates a particle storm will also greatly increase ionization of anything that wave hits. And in fact, that is just what happened. On August 21st, there was a massive explosion on the far side of the sun. So this is the side of the sun that's not facing Earth, and that launched out a huge coronal mass ejection at quite high velocity, greater than 1,000 kilometers per second. Here we see the 5.5 astronomical unit space weather model created for that by NASA. And so the Earth is right there. We fixed the Earth in place for these models. The sun is in the center. We have Venus right there. This orange shot there is Mercury. Mars is red. Here is Jupiter. And I've put in 3I Atlas. We also see a variety of probes in the near-Earth environment that they show on these models. So you'll notice that 3I Atlas passes over the Psyche probe pretty closely, which is interesting. That's due to rendezvous with one of the largest asteroids in the asteroid belt in, I think, 2029. But you'll see this large coronal mass ejection propagate out there. That is from that far side explosion. And you see that sweeps by Mars pretty nicely. But that solar storm shockwave does not hit 3I Atlas directly. Maybe just the slightest flank impact from the edge of that wavefront will hit 3I Atlas. But here we are on Earth. This solar storm launch was not conducive to hit us with a radiation storm, because with these most powerful explosions on the sun, you accelerate a lot of particles to relativistic speeds. That is, speeds near the speed of light. As a result, the faster a particle is traveling, the more energy it has, and therefore the greater ionization it can do. Well, we are right now in an S1 proton radiation storm as a result of that far side explosion. And those particles are having to cut against the solar wind instead of flowing in a direction that is conducive due to the magnetic field dynamics. You normally want an explosion from about here, so they flow in nicely through the magnetic field directly into the Earth. But instead, from that angle, it's having to cut across the magnetic field. And even then, we are in an S1 radiation storm. It's greatly enhanced flux. Normal values are about 0.2 for protons greater than or equal to 10 mega electron volts, and an S1 threshold is 10 particles per cubic centimeter. So it's a huge difference. Well, even though this coronal mass ejection did not hit 3I Atlas, instead it has hit Mars, it definitely hit 3I Atlas with a ton of these relativistic protons and other ions. And so it received a much stronger radiation storm than we did. And those James Webb Space Telescope observations were done on the 6th of August. This was launched out on the 21st of August, and that storm takes a little bit of time to sweep through, let's say a couple days. And so it just underwent a major ionization event. Therefore, that coma likely has expanded, and also the percentage of plasma within that coma has also increased. And again, as we talked about with these complex dusty plasmas, is the plasma creates these interesting nanoparticles. And when carbon's involved, that is diamonds and graphite and these other exotic materials. So we have this interstellar object. We don't know what is the nucleus itself. It clearly is carbon rich. If it has a diameter of about 50 kilometers, which is what is indicated by the Sphere X observations, that's a huge object, way bigger than Oumuamua or Borisov, the two other interstellar objects.
Borisov. I couldn't think of that name, the other name a little while ago. Borisov. So there's been two other objects. And remember, Oumuamua came first in roughly, I think, 2017. Remember the long object that looked like a cigar, right? Oumuamua in Hawaiian, as I said, means the one who comes first, meaning or implying that there's other objects. Now, my question is, did they know this? Did they know that there were going to be other objects? Why name it that in the first place? It seems like they knew more than we've been told.
That have flown through. Though there are other objects in our solar system which are larger, like the centaurs, 200 kilometers across, of course, the dwarf planets, our moon, things of this nature. Regardless, it is a big object traveling at very high velocity. You would only need like a 1 millimeter layer around a 50-kilometer diameter object to sublimate over the course of a few years to provide this sort of coma. So it's not like it's going to evaporate away on us. It can continue to produce this coma and even expand that out very easily and effortlessly for a long period of time. And it's not going to be our solar system forever. But because it is creating this complex, dusty plasma coma, now it has a lot of unique electromagnetic interactions that it can perform within our solar system, and that close inclination to the ecliptic plane means that it is interacting with the heliospheric current sheet generated by the solar wind and the sun, which all the planets are embedded within. So we're already seeing a lot of solar activity in the direction of 3I Atlas. There were some big solar flares and coronal mass ejections that were launched out before this biggest eruption occurred on the 21st. Those were more aligned to hit 3I Atlas directly. And again, as it gets closer and closer in, there just in general will be a greater photoionization effect due to these very highly vibrational light photons, ultraviolet light, extreme ultraviolet, X-ray, causing some of that CO2 to ionize at least temporarily before recombining with an electron. So you get this electron that pops to a higher orbital because it's energized, and then there's a recombination occur in that plasma. That ion now becomes a neutral gas once more. So some of this coma is plasma, is made up of these charged carriers. So these complex dusty plasma processes are occurring at 3I Atlas, and we don't know exactly what that means, and therefore we really don't know what 3I Atlas is. It's quite a bit different than any other comet we have observed. There are people that think it could be an alien craft. I think that's probably not the case. I think it's its own classification of object that is the first that we've seen of, and because it's coming in from a completely different part of the galaxy, perhaps even beyond, it formed under completely unique conditions. And so we can't apply much of our current knowledge base to understanding what 3i Atlas is. So yes, that is correct. We have an interstellar object currently traveling through the solar system, which at its maximum extent is half the diameter of the sun. Now keep in mind that the overall mass of this object is quite low. This is of a pretty low density CO2 gas, plasma, dust mixture, but it is still extending out half the diameter of our sun, by far the largest object in our solar system. And so I expect a lot of very unique interactions between 3i Atlas, the sun, and all the planets over the course of its movement through the solar system because of these complex dusty plasma physics. If we look back to Oumuamua, the first interstellar object observed in 2017, we saw some double-digit X-class flares in the days immediately around its perihelion, and also the strongest earthquake of 2017, magnitude 8.2 in Mexico, struck one day before its perihelion. And Oumuamua flew into our solar system at a very high inclination. So only interacted with the solar wind, the heliospheric current, and the overall electromagnetic system of the inner planets, the inner solar system, for a short duration of time. 3i Atlas is flying in much, much, much larger than Oumuamua with a huge coma. We didn't observe a coma on Oumuamua, and it's traveling along basically the ecliptic plane, interacting with us for a long duration of time. The only difference really is that it's going to be traveling just inside the orbit of Mars, whereas Oumuamua actually swung in closer than the orbit of Mercury. But I expect some very unusual dynamics to unfold as it relates to the sun, solar activity, perhaps processes here on Earth. And if you also consider plasma consciousness, then that adds in a whole nother dimension and layer of depth to consider as it relates to this interstellar object, it bringing in perhaps.
Right. So we will possibly see some solar flares, serious solar flares, but also possibly plasma discharge.
Interstellar information and consciousness, because you cannot separate consciousness from the quantum field, and the quantum field underlies everything. For example, an electron is not really a particle, it's just an expression, a probability of the quantum field. And so that is underlying everything, and we know that consciousness is inherent to that. So this interstellar object has some sort of consciousness to it. The sun has some sort of consciousness to it. Of course,
What does that mean? Consciousness.
We all have consciousness. We all have free will. What these two are going to do together and in concert with the other planets and objects in our solar system is a big, big mystery. Now let's examine the key dates that we should be aware of as it relates to the movement of 3i Atlas through the solar system, both the inner solar system and the outer solar system. I have this set for today, August 27, 2025.
So let's take a look at that together. I got that same viewer pulled up here. And I'll leave a link down below where you guys can do the same thing. So here is today. Where it is currently, there we go, is at this position right here. So you could see what he was talking about. This is coming in at a 5-degree angle, as we can see there on the ecliptic, it coming in this way and coming out below Jupiter, just below Jupiter. So it's going to cut right across the top of Mars and below Jupiter. At some point, we're going to see that, as we can see the interaction with Mars here sometime in September. And look what the position of the Earth is. So this would be daytime. You know, the planet and the comet is going to be hidden in the veil of the sun. Now, if this thing starts to brighten up, is it possible that we would see what it seems like two suns in the sky? I don't know. We're speculating here, right? You can see the angle there in 5 degrees, but let's forward it a little more. So there's October the 1st of October, we just went across the top of Mars, and clearly we're not going to be able to see that because of the sun. But if you take a look at this, by the time we get to October, let's see, November, we're going to see that it's going to fly right through where Mars crossed before. And as it continues, it's going to get closer to Jupiter and go right under Jupiter. So we can get a better shot like that. Right under Jupiter. Now this is going to be really close. I don't know the exact distance, but you can see the position of the Earth at this point. The sun's on the other side. So in February, we should be able to see this object in a better way without the obscuring of the sun. And as it gets closer, will we see? Okay. Still not obscured by the sun. So we're into March. March is probably our best time to see some kind of, especially like March 24th, plasma discharge. I don't know. We'll have to see, you guys. We did see this before. If you recall, Siding Spring, what happened with that? And this was the
October 19th, 2014.
2014. When Siding Spring flew over Mars, there was a discharge on that, as I told you before.
Spring will pass.
Will we see this again?
Only 132,000 kilometers away, which would be like a comet passing about 1/3 of the distance between the Earth and the Moon. The nucleus of the comet won't hit Mars, but there could be a different kind of collision. We hope to witness two.
And there was. The atmospheres collided. Let's go back to that code right now. Just real quick before we get into the interstellar object. Just to recall, we had been looking for some sort of object that would be what the Bible calls wormwood. So this is where all this started. As you can see, wormwood is vertical, connecting, well, also with the actual access term of this comet, 2013 A1 Siding Spring. Here's the access term. And if you look really closely, the word collides is right there in the plain text and vertical right next to it. Okay, so we were looking at, and of course we got Mars and Will Smite. Again, I was looking for stones of fire, you know, some sort of debris trail that would be what we would call wormwood. Of course, it didn't line up that way. It did collide. So the code was correct, spot on. For over a year before it actually happened, we had the word collides in there. And if you recall, I called it as a direct hit. That's what I thought we were going to see, because I was thinking Schumacher Levy 9. And, you know, again, sometimes we just got to let the code speak for itself and not so much interpretation on there. So the code was right. Jonathan was wrong, which has been a case before, right? I've had codes that were spot on, and my interpretation of what was there was a little bit skewed, right? So let's go and look at what I got for you in Bible code. Now, Interstellar was encoded several times, but I want to take you to the smallest skip, which is 1. We've got Interstellar at a skip of 1, which is clearly a abacus effect. I want to take you to, this is in, I think it's Obadiah. Yeah, Obadiah. Hebrew text is Obadiah 1:4 is where this is. Look what it says there. Though thou exalt thyself as the eagle, and though thou set thy nest among the stars, thence will I bring thee down, saith Yah. Now, interesting that it says, bring thee down. That's fallen, right? Look at this other one. This is another interstellar table. And like I said, it's here several times. Atlas is also here with this. But what I want to see is what crosses the axis term there, the fallen, the Nephilim. So we got interstellar object, interstellar, the fallen. We've also got the word for harbinger. It's here 3 times, very close proximity. But we also have comet in the light blue and Atlas, comet Atlas stacked on each other there. Is it a spaceship? You guys, the word spaceship does appear vertical. Now, it's not in very close proximity, but it's there. Now, is it based on this? Is it a spaceship? I think it's here possibly because people are talking about this. They're speculating on it. And so there is a connection to spaceship. Now, I could be wrong about that. I don't believe I am. I don't believe we've got Nephilim flying around in spaceships, though some believe that is the case. We will see, right? However, Nibiru is here. Now, I don't think this is Nibiru. And why am I looking for Nibiru? Because of the star from Jacob code, which is in the book of Numbers. Remember the prophecy from Balaam, right? A star shall come from Jacob. We'll look at that in just a minute. Well, that is directly connected to Nibiru. Also, another code, if we got that same term crossing over, and is in the text where in Isaiah, where Hezekiah asked the Father to roll back time, right? Make the sun go back 10 degrees. That is also connected to Nibiru. And also in the Yeshua is my name code about the crucifixion, we also find Nibiru there. Now, why is that significant? Because there was a 6 hour, is it 3 hours? 3 hour eclipse. He was on the cross 6 hours, 3 hour eclipse. Eclipse don't last that long, especially a lunar. And by this point, the moon's in the wrong place at Passover time for an eclipse. Okay, there was an eclipse of the sun. We know it. The Gospels say it happened. It was unnatural. We can also see the words of Pilate. Pilate wrote a report to Caesar, and he spoke about this. He said there was darkness in the land, unnatural darkness all in the land, and a earthquake that went all the way to Lower Egypt. That's written, right? Okay, so we've got confirmation there. This object, aka Planet X or Nibiru, is involved in some way. I think Oumuamua, the second interstellar object, this one as well. Could we possibly see Nibiru emerge after? I think we can, you guys. I think we can expect something like that to happen because the Bible says that it's going to happen. Okay, so let's go over and I just spoke about this one to you. Just compare. Okay, so this is the one in Isaiah about Nibiru. And I just found this extension today on this one. Nibiru is the access term, the mountain Nibiru, right? The Bible says wormwood is a flame, like a flaming mountain, right? The mountain Nibiru. And then we got wormwood is connected there. From stars, behold, the day's coming. There twice, but also right here, which I think is Isaiah 38. Behold, I will bring again the shadow of degrees, which has gone down in the sundial of Ahaz, 10 degrees backwards. So the sun returned 10 degrees by which it was gone down. Now, I think this object, Planet X, Nibiru, wormwood, is the object that this happened. It is the object from Isaiah 53, from the crucifixion, and also, and by the way, we have this many, many times in different places, this word Nibiru. Here it is in Numbers from the prophecy of Balaam, right? In the end of days, crossing that, in the end of days, Nibiru, long spelling, right? We see harbinger there, the crucifixion. So it's definitely connected. Now let's take this code and make it to a skip of 9. So we're going to make this cylinder smaller because all these lateral terms that are here just looks like a bunch of letters. But when I change the cylinder width on this, you're going to see something really remarkable. You're going to see all those terms stand up straight. So what do we have here? That's lateral. We've got the Hebrews. We've got signs or signals and codes of Jehovah. Signs or signals. And I see the nations here. So the Goyim, this would be the Hebrews, the nations, signs or signals and codes from Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. And this down the back side of it here, and the day is coming when my name will be revealed. That's there as well. Also in the end of days. Let's take a look at, just in case you don't know what I'm talking about. Let's go to the actual text. You can see it's Numbers 24. And this is all right. And now, behold, I go into my people. Come therefore, and I will advertise to thee what this people shall do to thy people in the latter days. And he took up this parable and said, Balaam the son of Beor had said, and the man whose eyes are open had said, I shall see him, but not now. I shall behold him, but not nigh. There shall come a star out of Jacob. Now, let me just stop right there because this goes back to not only Yeshua, but a false Messiah called Simon Bar Kokhba, or Bar Kokhba, which means son of the star. Now, if you recall, I believe it was a Rabbi Akiva who had hailed this guy. This is long after Yeshua, hailed this guy as a Messiah because when he was born, this is why they call him son of the star. There was seen over Jerusalem. By the way, this is the time the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans. A star was seen that looked like a sword. So imagine the Bethlehem star, which looks like a cross. This star, which was inverted, it looked like an upside down cross, which in the sky would have appeared like a sword. This is what they saw. So Akiva is telling this guy, you're the Messiah. You need to lead this sword, rebellion against Rome. It failed miserably. He was proven that he was killed. He was proven to be a false Messiah. Akiva was forever, his reputation was tarnished because of this, right? A star from Jacob. This is why the rabbis, Glazierson has been looking at Nibiru codes, because he has seen the very same thing I'm talking to you about. This is why it's been dubbed by the rabbis. They have named this star Nibiru. Okay, we know it, I believe, would be wormwood, or what causes wormwood to be a thing. So very small place there, you guys. Now, the fact that we can find all this information on a very small, narrow strip, okay, talking about a sign in the heavens that's going to take place connected to the crucifixion, right? But also, this is a cyclical event that continues to happen because there's an orbit involved. We're seeing the same, just like Halley's Comet coming back around. This thing has come through our area multiple times, folks. And I know this is going to upset some people who have a different cosmology outlook than what I currently have. I don't know what to tell you. This is biblical. The Bible says it. I believe it. We can find codes on it. So I don't know how you reconcile there's no deep space or there's no galaxy. Okay. I just don't understand that. But the Bible seems to be pointing us in that direction, folks. I'm going to continue to work on this a little more. If you got anything, listen, comment down below. Let me know what you think. Give me some words to look for, some ideas. I did look for the actual nomenclature of this thing. 3i Atlas which appears many times, but I wanted to narrow that search down to something a little more unique. And so I looked for what they call it, this interstellar object, and there it is. It is here, folks. And I think we're going to be talking about this for a couple of months at least. And follow this thing. We'll probably see some interesting harbinger. This thing is for signs. It's telling us something. It's a harbinger of something else that's coming. Okay. So let's pay attention to it. Let's learn. Let's look at it in the Maseroth and try to figure out what Yah is telling us about this. So if you haven't already, please give us a like. If you haven't, subscribe. We'd appreciate it if you do so. Please share this video. And we'll see you in the next one. Shalom to you.